Hey.
Hi.
Hello. Welcome back, Misfits, and welcome back to a new episode. Today, we're back with the Bible's Greatest Hits. This is the series that won't end.
There's just so many.
There's just so many great hits. It's like the Now Greatest Hits. You remember those CDs?
Yeah, it was like volume 54.
Volume 109.
We're going to be here in 2025. And
yes.
Guys, we have another one.
Exactly. So, I promise it's ending soon. But today, we're talking about the three in the fiery furnace, right? So, a little context. This story takes place in the book of Daniel. The Bible tells us that King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had taken the Israelites captive. After capturing them, the king gives an order and says, and this is straight from the Bible, bring to the palace some of the young men of Judah's royal family and other noble families who had been brought to Babylon as captives. Select only strong, healthy, and good-looking young men, he said. Make sure that they are well-versed in every branch of learning, are gifted with knowledge and good judgment, and are suited to serve in the royal palace. Train these young men in the language and literature of Babylon. So, based on this description, the Bible tells us that Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were four of the young men chosen, and they were all from the tribe of Judah. So, then we find out that once they were chosen, they were given Babylonian names, right? So, Daniel was called Belteshazzar, Hananiah was called Shadrach, Mishael was called Meshach, and Azariah was called Abednego. The goal was to make them forget their names and adopt their Babylonian names. So therefore, they would choose the Babylonian way. But as you'll see, as we continue the story, that's definitely not what happened. Mm-hmm. Now, if you know anything about the Bible, you've heard about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and the fiery furnace. The Bible tells us God gave these four young men an unusual aptitude for understanding every aspect of literature and wisdom. And God gave Daniel the special ability to interpret the meanings of visions and dreams. And so, because of these gifts, the king was impressed with them, found them capable, and they entered the royal service to serve King Nebuchadnezzar.
This reminds me a little of like with David, when King Saul also like saw his strengths and was like, I need you to be part of my my royal, subjects or whatever.
Yes.
So kind of this king seems to have kind of the same idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He knows what he was looking for.
Yeah.
So here we're going to stop talking about Daniel and focus on the other three Hebrew boys. They're all Hebrew boys, but we're going to start talking about Daniel because Daniel kind of just goes on to have a little spin-off series. And,
he has a different journey for a bit.
Yeah, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have their own story. So we're going to focus on them. So at this point, King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue of himself that was 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. Ooh. So after they set out the statue, they made a decree that whenever anyone heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and pipes and other musical instruments, they had to bow to the ground to worship the statue. So the big shiny statue is out. It's in the courtyard, right? And as soon as all of these instruments start sounding, everyone has to basically take a minute, bow down, and worship the statue.
And like basically any instrument too, like just if you hear music almost.
Yeah, if you hear a jingle, if a cell phone rings, you better bow.
Yeah, you better.
Yeah, exactly. So the edict, when they basically stated that you had to go bow down at the statue whenever you heard any of these instruments, they also said that whoever refuses to obey will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. Now, I know we aren't talking about Daniel anymore, but if you also know the story of Daniel and the lion's den, this decree and this story sounds very familiar.
Yeah, so kings have, I guess, like a habit of doing stuff like this. They've definitely wanted to be like praised and whatever. So
yeah,
this wasn't the first time, I guess. That's what I'm saying. This king is like, I have a decree, worship me.
Yes. So we fast forward in the story a little bit. They sound all the horns and stuff, all the musical instruments, all the flutes, all the things are happening. And then the Bible tells us that an astrologer goes to the king to tell him that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refuse to serve your gods and do not worship the gold statue you have set up. So this astrologer ran to the king and was like, hey, they're not doing what you asked them to do.
Tattletale for real,
he didn't have anything else to do.
But of course he was on the king's side. So.
Yes. The king is pissed. He calls for the three boys and asks them if it was true that they wouldn't worship him, right? He gives them one more chance to worship the statue, but if they refused, he would throw them into the blazing furnace. So I appreciate that the king asked them.
Want to hear it from you.
Exactly, because he was impressed by them, right? Because
Yeah.
they were very educated, they were handsome, they had
I'm sure
God's
he remembered
anointing
them.
on
He's
them.
like, yeah.
He's like, I like these guys. Let me make sure that
So
he's telling me
I don't
the
want to
truth.
get rid of them.
I'm not trying
so
to
I'm gonna
burn you.
double
You're
check.
doing a really good job.
Yeah.
So let me ask. Yeah. So we appreciate that. Oh, and then the king asks a question, which is a very cool foreshadowing. The king asks, what God will be able to rescue you from my power?
Yeah.
So he tries to check them. He's like, if I throw you in there, who's going to save you? Right? And of course, the three boys they worship the one and true God. So they're not even fazed. And they say to the king, this is straight from the Bible, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty." Very polite.
Yes.
But
Still respectful.
Yes, very respectful. "But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up." They were very clear.
And very firm.
This is who we are.
Yeah.
And this is what we're about to do.
Like, I
Your
hear
Majesty.
you, but with all due
respect, however,
no.
not doing it.
So yeah, so this happens, and the king, of course, is even more mad because, you know, he has this decree. He wants them to worship him, and they just, you know, stand their ground. And so he's pissed, and he orders a furnace to actually be heated 7 times hotter than the usual. So it's already a furnace, but here we are, 7 times hotter. And he ordered some of the strongest men of his army to tie them up and throw them in the blazing furnace. So it says that they tied them up and threw them into the furnace fully dressed. And because the king had demanded such a hot fire in the furnace, the flames killed the soldiers as they threw the 3 men in. So it was
crazy.
So hot.
It's crazy. It's like you said, it's already a furnace, but it's like, I want them to die quicker. Like,
yeah, or like, I really want them to really feel the pain.
Right.
You know?
It's fire. We're going to feel the pain.
Yes, it's hot in there.
Make it
already.
hotter.
I don't know how adding more is gonna make it hotter. Like,
I don't know
but
how
you
that
know,
works.
that was just his mentality, and in his anger, it was like, do more.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for him, he lost some men because it was too hot.
Yes.
So at this point, they're thrown in there. They're in the furnace, and all of a sudden, the king says, "Didn't we tie up these 3 men, and throw them into the furnace?" So he's like curious, asking this question, and of course, like, what do you mean? So he's like, "Look, I see 4 men unbound, walking around in the fire unharmed, and the 4th looks like a god." So once he saw that, he was like, "You need to come out." Like, "Hey, can you hear me? Can y'all come out? I don't want to get close because I'll die."
Send someone in there to bring them out? Like, how did that go?
Yeah, that was a weird picture, but hopefully, you know, obviously you can see in, so there must have been a window or something.
Right.
But yeah, he like yelled at them because he was like, "What's going on? Come out." And when they come out, they are completely unharmed, and they didn't even smell like smoke, which is just a whole like other level.
Yes.
Because if you've ever like been at a bonfire or a cookout,
Yeah.
like you stand even 30 feet from the barbecue pit, like you're gonna smell like
You're
smoke.
gonna smell like smoky
Someone's
Joe.
gonna be like, "Were you outside? Were you at a barbecue?"
You were like 20 feet at a picnic table, minding your own business. You still smell like smoke.
You're like, "You were at the carne asada." Well, you know, and
Yep.
it's like, I can't deny it. My hair, it's in my hair, it's in everything. So, but they didn't even smell like smoke. This was a furnace 7 times hotter.
They was
And
walking
nothing.
around in there.
They were walking around in there, exactly, which is crazy. But after the king witnessed this, he says, "Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's command and were willing to die rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make this decree. If any people, whatever their race or nation or language, speak a word against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they will be torn limb from limb, and their houses will be turned into heaps of rubble. There is no other God who can rescue like this." So he was definitely like astounded.
Right.
Like,
And rightly so.
yes, of course. This was a whole other level. And then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to even higher positions in the province of Babylon. So this is where the story ends. This is kind of the culmination of them, you know,
In the
being
fiery
thrown in
furnace,
and
yeah.
then coming out. And what like a powerful image of, you know, the power of God. But to get a little teachy, as we like to do around here, just wanted to address some things. So first is the fact that there were 4 men in the furnace and one looked like God. So that 4th man could have been an angel. There's also some commentary that says it was probably Jesus, which is awesome. They call it a pre-incarnate appearance of the Messiah, or a Christophany, which basically just means an appearance of Jesus before he was born and before he appears in the New Testament. Secondly, just want to point out that although the 3 boys were captives, they never assimilated to the Babylonian culture, which we kind of said a little earlier. They changed their names, so they were called by these Babylonian names, but as far as what they did, who they truly identified as, God, who they truly were, that didn't change, and we saw it in their actions and in their words.
Yeah,
before the king,
because it's like they changed their name, they tried to change their identity, and you can call me whatever you want. However, this is still
I know
my
who God is.
Exactly, and this is still what I'm going to do.
Yeah, which is really powerful and just kind of shows that God was with them and in this whole situation. And third, this story is a great example of what it's like to be a follower of God. So if you're following God, that doesn't mean that we don't go through hardships. Like, they didn't not get thrown in the furnace.
They were captives in a foreign land by a foreign king, and then
they already had all these things
work in the service of that king. And then, bringing Daniel back in, he was thrown in a den of lions.
Right.
And then these guys were thrown in a pit of fire.
Right. So they had all these things stacked against them. They were really up, fighting up a hill. And this is the thing that they're like, we're not going to budge, And so you can see just the power of what that is. That even through all the hardship that they went through, anything that, could have gone wrong doesn't mean that things won't go wrong, but what it does mean is even though you're going to be thrown into a fire furnace like they did, 1, you'll come out of it, and 2, you won't even smell like smoke. So in other words, you won't look like what you've been through. Like, Jesus is going to bring you through it. He's walking with you. He's protecting you. So it might feel terrible. It might look terrible, but Jesus is with you, and he's not going to let that reflect at the end. Like, he's going to bring you out of it.
Yep.
And so lastly, we also see a picture of what it looks like to be faithful to God in these times, where they were having, literally risking their lives, putting their lives on the line, but they were being obedient. They stood strong. And so it also helped others come to believe in God and what they were doing. So, I mean, the king, just flipped it. He went from, you need to worship me, only me, no other gods, to anything, everything that they're believing.
Yours
believe
is
it.
The one.
Yeah. He's the power. Yeah, this is a real God. And so he sees that and sees the power that, that's with them. And he's like, this is where it's at. And this is, where I need to be and everyone needs to be.
Yes. So we can see how their obedience just made other people come to Christ. And that's the goal, right? To walk with God and be an example. And even though we go through hardships and go through struggles, we can do it in a way where we're trusting God with whatever it is that's happening. And so other people, because they see you going through this tough time, they see you in the fiery furnace, but you still have your peace, you still have your joy. They're like, what are you doing that I'm not doing? Because I would like to go through that battle like you did. You know what I mean? It's a beautiful picture. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. We do hope you learned something more of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Yeah.
Mostly we talk about Daniel, and then we talk about them in the fiery furnace. And everyone knows their names because you always say all 3 in a row. You know?
They're
it's a combo meal. But I don't think a lot of people knew more details about the story.
It's even in the names, understanding that those weren't their names. That's what we know them as, because that's what they were given and that's kind of what they grew up with. But they knew their true identity, and I hope we were able to share, just because people call you something or they know you as something doesn't mean that's who you are. God already put something on your life.
Your identity comes from him.
Yeah.
And if you want to know what that looks like, it's in the Bible.
Yes.
Yes, it is. And we hope you enjoyed this episode. We will see you next week. As always, this is Fran.
This is Yadi.
We are the Midtown Misfits, and we're out of here. Bye.
Bye.